God bless everybody today. It is January 20th of 2023. This is actually a Daniel 8, and we're moving it into Daniel 10 also, so you can understand these are all part of future prophecy. You can actually go back into Daniel 7, and it starts as a futuristic prophecy there in parts of it and works through Daniel 12. But the two main chapters that we're going to be talking about are Daniel 8 and Daniel 10 and how they affect us as we move forward. Now, I've been talking about this date of 1/24 of 2023 for a couple months. I'd put a video out about this. I'd found this date or these date stamps in Daniel 10 that I was concerned about, and so I brought those forward so you could understand what they were, and I'll go over them real quick just so you can see where this leads to. So if we go into Daniel 10, Daniel is in Persia at the time. He's under his fourth king, so he's at the end of his 70th year of captivity, and he is a magistrate. He's actually third in charge of this kingdom since he's been elevated by Cyrus. And so Daniel is watching a lot of things going on in the kingdom and around his kingdom, and he's distraught for 3 full weeks. It's talking about him mourning and how he can't eat or drink or anything, and that he can't fulfill his duties. And then on the 24th day of that first month, so think of January 24th, he was at the Euphrates River, and he has this vision. And so this angel, or in this case, possibly even Jesus, because the way it's structured in the chapter, indicates that he's going to show him and illuminate him on this vision that he's showing him about what's to come in the latter days. And he talks about in verse 13 in Daniel 10 that this prince of Persia would withstand him for 21 days, but then Michael, the chief prince, Archangel Michael, would come to help, and that he would remain there with the kings of Persia. And then if you go down even further, it indicates that once Michael goes and fights against Persia, that Greece would come in after that. So Michael's going to be sent in first, and then we're going to see Greece, or Turkey in this case, which is Nebuchadnezzar, basically go forward and attack Iran, and that they would fall. And if you go into the structure of Daniel 8, it indicates that, as I've been talking for a while, that when Turkey forces the Kurds to align with Iran, and that alignment happens, then Turkey would attack both these nations. And so it's important that you understand the context of where I'm bringing this information to you. Understand that this is a supernatural attack. This isn't just conventional weaponry. When you bring Archangel Michael against a nation, it's going to fall fairly quickly. So the question that I had brought up in this would be that if on the 24th day he sees this vision, and he's being withstood for 21 days. So I took that back 21 days from the 24th, and we ended up at the 3rd. And I think that's important based on what's going out here at this very moment, because a lot of things happened on the 3rd of January, and we're working into the 24th since today is the 20th. So will something happen on the 24th on that very specific date? Maybe not, but it indicates that a chain of events possibly could start on the 24th that would move fairly quickly forward as we move through in the next month or so. So let's look at those, what actually did happen, what's leading us up to where we are today. So we're just going to do some quick review on some of the articles that came out within the last 3 weeks or so. And you can sort of see how this is all playing out and whether or not anything's actually going to happen as we move forward. It just seems to be lining up, and I'm trying to bring this information out to you. Something is going to break. There's too many working parts out here for something not to happen. What it might be is anyone's guess, but I'm going to give you some scenarios as we move forward. and we can sort of see where this might end up. So on the 3rd, as I indicated, 21 days prior to the 24th, when Daniel has that vision, a lot of things started to transpire in front of us. One is Netanyahu, who says he'll revert to an openly opposing Iran, the Iran deal, and he also names a security cabinet, which is extremely right-wing leaning, and it is cracking down on the Palestinians even today as we speak. So this was starting to get ugly on the Hamas-Palestinian front, and this has to be watched as we move forward. Another event that happened either on the 2nd or 3rd, depending on what time zone you're on, we had Damascus hit by an Israeli airstrike, and it briefly put Damascus airport out of commission. And so this is going to inflame not only Syria, but Iran and Russia, because they're all within this area. Also on the 3rd, we had Iran launch, I believe it was 2 missiles on one of our U.S. Air bases in Iraq. And a lot of this transpired due to General Soleimani was assassinated on the 3rd of January, 3 years prior, when Donald Trump was a president. And they've been talking about a retaliatory strike against Israel and the United States since then. And so is this building up to where they're actually going to see a retaliatory strike through Hamas, Hezbollah, and these proxy groups that Iran basically utilize against Israel and around that region? Is something that we're going to have to watch for. And then an interesting phenomena happened. We saw this comet appear around January the 4th that indicates this hasn't been around since prehistoric times. They say in 50,000 years, but I'm not a carbon dating type guy, and so I don't believe we've been here that long. But this comet hasn't been here for a long time. It has a green appearance to it, and so I don't know. It's just interesting timing that this comet would come in about the same time this is all happening. And so Turkey then started to talk to Assad, and we started to see some normalization of ties between Syria and Turkey. But this hasn't been going very well, and I think Turkey is going to end up going against Assad. And what we've seen recently is an alignment between Iran and Putin, and Israel, Turkey, and Egypt. And that's what the prophecies indicate, is these things would happen, and then we would see Turkey basically smash or destroy Iran as we move forward. And so, as you can see, this is moving quickly as we go forth. So you have to understand there's 2 fronts going on here. There's multiple fronts, but 2 that you need to watch. The invasion of Turkey and how they're going to push the Kurds southeast so they'll align with Iran. And the second front is how Israel is cracking down on Palestine, and this is affecting Hamas and Hezbollah, and how we're going to see a potential attack probably directed through Hamas first, that's going to boil over to some of these other proxy groups like Hezbollah. This is going to then rain, if not hundreds, if not thousands of missiles down on Israel, since they have projected of upwards over 100,000 missiles in stock. And so we don't know how many missiles, but every time they do unleash a missile attack, it's usually between hundreds, if not thousands of missiles. And they can't knock all these missiles down. And so the Palestinians are having their flags banned in Israel occupied areas. Also, they're being evicted, and so thousands of people are being removed. Their homes are being demolished, and they're fighting back. There's a lot of unrest in the street. There's a lot of protests. Up to this point today, I believe there's been about 15 Palestinians killed in these different confrontations. And so this is starting to really heat up as we move forward. So the UK is designating the Iranian Republican Guard as a terrorist group. And I believe they just did this through a vote just in the last day or so. But they've been talking about this for the last couple weeks. As you can see, this happened on the 5th. But I believe they have actually designated this, and so this is going to cause a lot of problems for Iran, just due to what this group is and what they represent in the country, and how General Soleimani was basically the spearhead to this. And so they're going to retaliate for this man getting killed 3 years ago, and this is going to affect the whole Middle East as we move forward. So Turkey's been trying to normalize ties with Assad and Syria because he needs airspace over that. He needs control. Right now, Russia has the control of airspace. So as Russia aligns with Iran, this isn't going to make Turkey very happy, and he's trying to genocide these Kurds because he feels they're a terrorist threat to his borders. And so this normalization with Assad is not going very well, because just shortly after that, and I'm not going to show you all the different articles, but Assad basically told Turkey to get out. He doesn't want them there. He doesn't want them to occupy, and told them to leave, and he wasn't going to do this normalization. So the question then is whether Turkey's just going to take it upon himself to basically attack and invade Syria and Iraq through Operation Claw Sword, which he started just a few months ago. And so now he hasn't done a land invasion yet, but he's done multiple bombings and things along the border, and he's softening these areas up so that when he does the land invasion, and he's been indicating he's going to do a land invasion at any time when he's decided that he wants to go in, he'll just go in, and he's not going to let anybody deter him. And so this is something that we're going to have to watch. So part of Turkey's issues is that the Kurds, he believes, is a terrorist group. Now, what's happening is there's a lot of protests going on in Iran, and these are Kurdish people and Iranians and things trying to overthrow the government, possibly. And you might see a regime change because this regime is fairly weak. But the other thing that happened was they killed a young Kurdish woman in Iran that was wearing her headscarf, and this set off all these protests. But at the same time, we had Erdogan go to Sweden because they're trying to get Sweden and Finland into NATO, and Turkey went over there. So Erdogan went over there, and they had an effigy of him hanging upside down, showing him to be Mussolini. And this has really infuriated him to the point where he may or may not allow Sweden and Finland to go in. And all 30 nations have to ratify this to allow a country to come in. All of them have to agree. So the question will be, as Erdogan rebuilds his Neo-Ottoman Empire that he's been talking about for 15 years, and he wants to do this by the end of 23, whether he would actually leave NATO so that he can genocide the Kurds and reform this Ottoman footprint of the old Ottoman footprint that was of World War I, or you can actually go back into Alexander the Great in the past and see that same footprint. They're the same footprint. So Alexander's footprint is the same footprint as the Ottoman Empire footprint from World War I, and this will be the new footprint that he's looking to rebuild in the future. This area includes Greece, it goes to Afghanistan, it goes over to Egypt, which is part of the northern African areas. There's 3 of them listed in Ezekiel, and then this whole area is going to basically encompass Israel, and then we're going to see an attack on them probably by the end of this year, based on my paradigm. So they're having these executions, and they've killed a number of people. I would say half dozen to maybe 10 people at this point over the last 3 weeks or so through these protests because they're trying to quell people down and get them to stop these protests, but that's just infuriating people more and more people are coming out, and so there's more and more pressure on the Iranian government to do something about this. One of the reasons Erdogan is having to move so quickly on this is he has an election cycle coming up. Now, this election cycle was supposed to happen in June, but for some reason, Erdogan has moved this to a May 14th date of this year. That's an interesting date because that is the birth date of the nation of Israel. So why did he pick May 14th and this specific date for his election cycle to end on? That's an interesting question. I believe that the answer will basically bring itself forward in the next few months. There's a lot of pressure going on with a lot of different groups out here. Hezbollah and the Palestinian Authority and Lebanon are trying to keep Hamas from attacking Israel with these massive missile attacks. Now, as this breaks down, the Palestinians are getting more and more pressure, and Israel's starting to crack down on them harder and harder. It's going to be harder for the Palestinian Authority in Lebanon through Hamas and Hezbollah to stop these factions from attacking because they're getting basically pummeled to death, and a lot of these people are getting killed, and Israel's doing some pretty harsh activity out here to recover some of these lands, and so this is going to boil over and something's going to break as we move forward. So if things weren't complicated enough, the National Security Officer for Israel visited the Temple Mount. Now this is prohibited. The Israelis don't have the ability under the certain agreement right now to pray at the Temple Mount. I know that sounds strange. It's in Jerusalem. It's in Israel. Why don't the Jews have the right to do this? But under the agreement that they have right now, they don't have this ability. And when this National Security Officer went there, this caused a firestorm, and this has really started to bring this tempo of a potential attack on Israel up as we move forward in the next few weeks. So as we keep moving forward, we're at the January 8th, and a lot is happening. As you can see, there's a lot going on the ground. Most people aren't following this. They're looking at Turkey, or Russia, Ukraine, or China, Taiwan, or other places. But you need to be watching Turkey because they're going to be the catalyst that brings war into the quarter of the Middle East, or the whole Middle East, or quarter of the world. Sweden is basically telling them that they can't, Turkey, we can't give you all these prisoners and all your demands that you're requiring. It's just not going to happen. And so I think there's an impasse here. And now that this effigy in Stockholm was produced and Erdogan is completely upset over this, I don't think it's going to happen anyway. And in this article, Israel's actually trying to get the population of Iran to overthrow their government. So this is just going to throw extra fire on this, fuel on this fire. There's no way this is going to go away, and something's going to boil up, and somebody's going to do something. Either Hamas is going to attack, Turkey's going to invade, Iran's going to attack through one of these proxies, or potentially Israel's going to take out targets they think are a threat to them. And this is boiling over to even other countries. They had 3 Kurdish people killed through a terrorist attack in France. And so there's massive protests going on in France also, and this is continuing to this day. And so we're watching a lot happening, and it all seems to revolve around the Kurds. I keep talking about Daniel 8, how the Kurds or the Medes are so important in this prophecy. So even Palestine, Lebanon, different groups or countries are starting to crack down on these terror cells because they're afraid of attack. Now you got to understand, if these groups attack Israel, then Israel's going to launch a massive attack against a number of places. They're going to attack not only Iran, they're going to attack Lebanon, Palestine, potentially Syria, and potential positions in Iraq also. These not only going to affect these groups of people, but they're going to affect the Kurds because they're in the middle of all this. And so we need to keep our eye on how an attack by Hamas and these groups would affect Israel's retaliation, and then we would watch potentially an invasion of Turkey that would drive the Kurds down, and you would see this alignment between Israel and Turkey, and that then would be the groups that would take out Iran over time. Mainly Turkey is what it indicates in the prophecy. Now, I won't show you all the different articles, but the Palestinian Authority is concerned that they're going to collapse under these Israeli sanctions. Jordan is concerned that this is going to affect them because if Israel gets into a confrontation with Iran, that's going to boil over to Jordan. Saudi Arabia is concerned, and Egypt is also concerned. You have all these different proxies. Iran also controls proxies in Yemen. And so if you look at Iran and you look at Turkey's positioning, they basically have them surrounded on all four sides. You got Turkey, you got Turkmenistan, you got Azerbaijan, you've got Afghanistan, and they control the Taliban there. You got Yemen to the south, and then you also have Syria and Iraq. And if they do this ground invasion, then they would control those two areas also. And so Iran is not in a very good position to hold up at this point. So some of the sites that you have to watch are like the West Bank, Gaza, and these areas that are going to be up against Israel, and that's where these potential missiles could come from, or some of these areas. So anytime you see these things in the news, it's going to affect Israel greatly. Even the Egyptian government is upset about this Temple Mount visit. This is a big deal. This is God's temple. The Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims all believe this is the most important place on the planet. It is God's seat. It is the center of the universe, at least in our world. And so all these people are condemning these indiscretions, and they should be avoided. They know that they shouldn't do these things, but they do them, and it's usually for their own, prosperity of the people that are actually doing it. So Turkey's been, if you've been watching the videos I've been posting, you'll notice that Turkey's been starting to do a lot of artillery attacks on the northern border of Syria and Iraq. And so they've launched this new operation called Claw Sword. And this is going to turn into a land invasion fairly soon. But he's right now softening up all these areas with artillery and different things so that when they start the land invasion, it'll go over a lot easier. And anytime you do these types of massive invasions with the amount of armor and stuff he's going to bring into this country, as he's been basically building it up over months, they want to do airstrikes first and soften these areas up so that the guys on the ground can come in and just take things over. And if you look at Daniel 8, and if you look at Daniel 10, and if you go into Isaiah, you'll realize that this destruction of Iran is going to happen quickly. And so this is going to be an airstrike, a drone strike, a land strike, and potentially a sea strike through the Caspian Sea or the Red Sea below. And we're going to see basically Iran light up in one day. Now, back in December, one of the reasons I think this is escalating is Putin has indicated that he is going to work with Iran to procure drones for nuclear components. And so everybody's concerned about Iran getting a bomb and how that's going to affect Israel and the Temple Mount. And if you don't think Temple Mount isn't the main thing we need to be watching here, it is, because the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews all consider this to be an extremely holy place in God's temple. And so they're not going to let Iran rain missiles down upon Israel and the Temple Mount, and Turkey's going to step in and help Israel take this problem out. So there's been, in the last few weeks, a number of meetings with Turkey, Syria, and Russia to try to figure out how they're going to deal with this, because Russia wants to keep Assad in place in Syria. If Assad falls, that'll create a vacuum, and that vacuum will be sucked up by Turkey. Russia's in that area right now and is building operations closer to the Israeli border in proxy with Iran. So this has been a real problem, and so we're going to see this end up where I believe Putin isn't going to have the pull to keep Assad in place, and Assad is basically telling Turkey to leave, and this has not changed in the last few weeks. And so Turkey's going to have to make a really hard decision. If he invades, this is going to cause a lot of conflict with NATO, and he's probably going to have to leave because they're not going to approve of this kind of a operation. And even though the UN's condemning Israel, they're not going to actually condone this type of operation, as they're basically telling Turkey that if they do this, that it's going to inflame the whole area, and multiple governments are over here basically complaining about this. And so the UN is trying to hold this off, but I don't think that's going to happen as we move forward. So Israel and their president, which is Isaac Herzog, which is not the same thing as Netanyahu, which is the prime minister. This is the leader of the country, Isaac Herzog. He has asked Turkey to normalize ties with them, and they are bringing the embassy back to Israel. So Turkey's bringing their embassy back to Turkey. Azerbaijan is also bringing their embassy back to Turkey. I keep talking about Azerbaijan being part of this group that are going to be, because Turkey is controlling that area, and they're also genociding the Armenians up there. So this has come a problem in the sense that Azerbaijan is going to be part of this. And if you look at Azerbaijan, they're next to the Caspian Sea, and if you go south of that, Tehran's about 50 miles from the Caspian Sea border. So if there's any ships in there, they can easily launch against Iran, and this is going to cause Tehran to fall quickly. So Erdogan's trying to cover all his bases. He's talking to the Iraqi government, he's talking to the Syrian government, which isn't going real well. He's down in Africa talking to a number of those different areas down there like Sudan and Libya. And so he's reforming and talking to all the countries right now that are in the old Ottoman footprint. And so if you look at who he's talking to in these different regions, this will take you from the attack on Daniel, or attack on Iran, which is Daniel 8, and once that completes and Iran falls, that would then morph into Ezekiel 38 and 39, and we see these 10 nations, including parts of Africa, expands over to Afghanistan, all the way up to Azerbaijan and over to Turkey. That whole area would be the area that would go against Israel as we move forward. And these are all 10 nations of radical Muslims that would attack them. And Afghanistan is involved in this. They had a bombing on the 11th, which killed approximately 20 people in Kabul. And so there's a lot of pressure on all sides of Iran at this point, and we're going to watch this manifest into a destruction of this nation soon. So they've had a number of attacks against Israel. They've been small at this point. When Hamas and Hezbollah actually do attack, you'll know it because there'll be thousands of missiles being launched. But they are having attacks on certain areas of Israel. This attack happened on the 11th around the Mount of Blessing. And so this is just heating up, and there's a lot of things going on at the same time, and so it's just hard to keep track of all the different stories. Netanyahu, just in the last few days, has been out to the front, especially the northern front, to check to see if everything's in place, because he knows something's coming. We're also having not only him checking on that, but Turkey and Assad are clashing on the borders. And like I said, this isn't going to work out well for Assad. He's probably going to get taken out. Now, everybody talks about Isaiah 21, how Damascus is going to get destroyed here in the near future. But I've been talking about that for a while, and if you go into that, it indicates that the king of the north and the south would be moving back and forth and warring against each other, and that is during Antichrist time. And so Damascus is in the middle of that, and over time Damascus will not exist. But that isn't going to happen in the near future. That's going to be a few years down the road. So you are going to see potentially Turkey invade and overtake that area fairly quickly. But once Turkey falls after they attack Israel and those 10 nations are destroyed and Antichrist rises, and he then is attacked by Egypt back and forth between the north and the south, the king of the north and the south, you're going to notice, and I've shown you on the maps how that works, that basically between these two groups, as Israel's being attacked also, because Israel isn't broken into, their walls don't fall for up to 3 years once Israel is attacked, that they would keep attacking around the city, and you'll notice that the main path would be Damascus, and so Damascus would fall over time. And in the last week, we've seen Turkey start to really ramp up their missile attacks and their artillery shelling along the pro-Assad borders, and that's what I mean. I just don't think Putin and Assad are going to, Putin's going to keep Assad in place, and Assad will be basically eliminated as a government, and there will be a vacuum there. It really won't be filled because Turkey will occupy the area. And one of the reasons I think this is going to ramp up is because Israel has put a new army chief in, and he's pretty extreme against the Palestinians. And I'm not against any group of people. I'm just saying this is the way it looks to me. He's going to crack down. Netanyahu's put him in place for a reason. He wants to control his northern border, and he wants to eliminate this problem on his northern border. And so he's brought this man in, and this man has indicated that if Hamas launches an attack on Israel, that he will set them back 50 years. And so he's not messing around. And I believe the United States has finally possibly given up on the Iran nuclear deal and indicated that it's probably a no-go and that they're going to have to shift to a plan B, which is basically, what do you do with Iran if they have a nuclear weapon? And that then falls back on Israel and probably Turkey before this is over. Now, two things that are happening is Iran is trying to get fighter jets from Russia, and Turkey's trying to get fighter jets from us. We're trying to block that sale of fighter jets to Turkey, and so whether that's going to happen, Turkey's pushing pretty hard on this one because he wants to have those air rights, and he wants to have a better equipment when he actually does the invasion. So he's been pushing on this one extremely hard. But whether the United States will actually capitulate, they might due to the money that's involved. But in general, if they do, this is just going to ramp up the conflict even more. And if Putin actually sends down his jets to Iran by March, as indicated in the news articles, then I'm guessing this is going to start to ramp up fairly quickly. And Turkey, Erdogan is not going to allow Russia to have these jets in Iran because that's going to complicate his situation. So the question would be whether Erdogan would act quicker before that sale takes place, and then Iran wouldn't have that air superiority. Turkey would actually. And as this article shows, this was on the 13th of January, that Syria, Assad is not going to work with Turkey unless they end their occupation, and that is not going to happen because he can't control the Kurds without it. So Assad just barking up the wrong tree, I think. And in Israel, they're having massive protests also. They had over 80,000 people hit the street the other day. Now, this has been millions at times. And so this is what Netanyahu is trying to stop, is he's trying to stop these larger demonstrations through these political reforms that he's been throwing down. And so the government, the Supreme Court, is trying to eliminate a few of his cabinet members right now that indicate through, there's been problems legally with them, or they've been, some people think that these charges have been pumped up sort of like they have on some of our own government officials over here, that they really don't have any standing. And so they're telling Netanyahu to basically remove these people from the cabinet. The one gentleman that they're trying to remove, he's pretty extreme right. So the Israeli Supreme Court has asked Netanyahu multiple times to remove this man from his cabinet, and he's not doing it. He keeps dismissing this. So I don't know how this is going to turn out. Part of the reason they want him gone is because he's much more far right than they want, and so I think they're trying to eliminate him from this position. And he's pretty strong with Netanyahu in their relationship, and so Netanyahu really doesn't want him to go, and so we'll see how this plays out. So on the 17th, we're getting closer to the 20th, 90 countries slam Israel over punitive measures against Palestine. And so now remember, no nation comes to Israel's aid at the end here. And so Israel's going to be left on their own before this breaks down. Not even the United States are really going to be in a position to help them. We don't have enough people or equipment over there anymore. And we're sending everything to Ukraine. We even took a store of ammunition, armaments, and different things like that from a storage facility in Israel, and just shipped that to Ukraine just the other day, because we're probably not wanting to deplete all of our weaponry here. And so they're going to start taking some of these other bases, and they're going to start cannibalizing some of this equipment and sending it over to this Third World War front in Ukraine and Russia. And like I say, nobody's watching Turkey, and so this is going to deplete our position and not really allow us to do a whole lot. And like I say, all nations around Israel, and this is on the 16th, are telling Israel, Egypt, Jordan, Palestine, all these groups are telling Israel that this is going to cause a lot of conflict for not only them, Israel itself, but all these other countries around them. And so you're going to see a lot of condemnation against Israel as they ramp up this attack. And they're going to blame it on this far right-leaning government, and they're going to blame it on Netanyahu because he's the one that brought it in. So as this ramping up, today we had an attack on a U.S. air base or a U.S. base in Syria. There were 3 drones that attacked this base, and I believe that none of our servicemen were injured, but I believe 2 Syrian people were injured in this attack. And so this is ramping up today. This is not going away. Something's going to happen. The 2 scenarios that I'm looking at mostly that we should be watching is a potential invasion from Turkey in the next few days, weeks, whenever Turkey decides to do this. And he will invade probably Syria and Iraq. The other thing that I'm looking at is possibly a launch of not hundreds, if not thousands of missiles against Israel through Iran's proxies, and this would then create a retaliatory strike against Iran and areas around Israel that are proxy to these Iranian different factions. And so these are the two things I'm looking at. I believe that probably we would see, based on Daniel 10, an attack on Israel, a retaliation of Israel onto Iran and its proxies, and then in the next few weeks we will see possibly an invasion by Turkey, because as the prophecy of Daniel 10 tells us, he's withstanding this for 21 days. We're moving from the 3rd to the 24th. After the 24th, is anything going to happen? Maybe not on that day, but shortly after that, as we move forward. That's sort of what we're looking at. So keep your eye on things. I'll keep updating. I'm sorry it's a little longer video, but I wanted to give you a little context on how this has built up in the last 3 weeks. And I've left a lot of things out because there's just so many things happening out here. But I do believe the 3rd was the start of a chain of events, and we're working into the 24th, and we'll see what happens as we play out this whole thing in the next month or so. God bless everybody. Keep your eye on this over here. I know everybody's got their optics on different areas of the world right now, but I believe Turkey is going to be a major player as we move forward. God bless. Find the open door. Find Jesus. And have a great night. So this is just going to heat up as we move forward.